Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Welcome back. You are listening to the podcast show From Zero to Revenue, the show that features the journey of successful entrepreneurs from around the world. I'm your host, Chris Yap. Today, we will discuss very important tips on how to raise capital for a startup company, particularly in the health technology industry. I'd like to thank our sponsor, GapTech Global, your one-stop shop outsourcing company for customer service and various back office services. You can learn more about their services at www.gaptechglobal.com. I am truly honored to introduce our very special guest today, a highly regarded medical practitioner, an entrepreneur, a venture capitalist, Dr. Amit Mehta. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I think today's episode is it's a testament as to how powerful LinkedIn is, because I reached out to you in LinkedIn, and here we are today where you are in the show. So thanks again for spending time with me today.
Yeah. I mean, LinkedIn's been a huge boom for the businesses that I'm in as well. And so I'm glad that we can connect to people fairly quickly and who have like-minded interests.
Absolutely. So Amit, you still have your medical practice, you still have the radiology practice, and at the same time you're managing certain investment portfolios. How did that come about? What's the vision? What's the overall vision?
I didn't start out wanting to be an investor per se. I was a doctor and trained 15 years, and I do what's called minimally invasive image guided surgery. So we move robots and tubes and wires through little holes in the body. And I was fairly passionate about that, love what I do. It's a very technical field. We use a lot of new equipment, a lot of cutting edge technology comes from this subspecialty in medicine. You hear about stents and you hear about coils and you hear about all these things that we're able to treat. So when I was training, I spent 10 years in Boston training at Harvard. I had gotten a bug and a significant interest in medical technology and wanted to develop devices myself as I saw a need in healthcare. That led to starting a company that was in the cancer detection space at the intersection of medicine, technology, and business. That startup raised some capital and then fell flat on its face. At the time, the technology people said, you have no technology without us. We want all the equity. The business people said, you can't sell this without us. So we want all the equity. And the medical people were just kind of like, we're so happy to be in a company. So it wasn't something that we were, but the company ultimately folded. But I learned a lot, both in operational and raising money. So I kind of said to myself at that point, I don't want to be in this situation again of raising money and having that difficulty. So as I finished working and training and moved out, I had an itch to start a company again as an operator. And so about 12 years ago, we started a company. It's a clinical trial healthcare IT company. And at that time, I went to raise money and realized how hard it was. Partly because I was young and partly because it was a very niche sort of concept. And I learned the hard way that it was very difficult to raise money, but ultimately did raise the money from a set of angel investors and got interested at that time. So since that time, I've kept an interest in angel investing, and we founded an angel network here where I live, and that angel network has made a series of investments. But at the time, the technology innovator in that company that I'd started when I was in training for radiology went on and became a venture capitalist. And so 15 years later, we connected, and he was starting a fund and sort of said, look, healthcare is a broken industry. We're going to make a lot of investments in healthcare. Why don't you come join us? Some of your ideas seem good. And so that was 3 funds ago, and $1 billion in capital ago. So we've now invested 2 funds. The first fund was $448 million. The next fund is $350 million. And we're currently finishing up our $250 million, the third fund, different name, and on a fundraise for a second fund in the current iteration, and the fourth fund that we've been investing together.
So that's really amazing as to just, the transformation. I wouldn't even call it transformation, but just how that integrated from the medical field to the business field. But growing up, what was the dream growing up? Was it to be a doctor? I mean, did you have any family influence as far as that's concerned? I believe you have an Indian roots, right? And I know I have a lot of Indian friends where the family. What you do now, there's a lot of influence from the family, from the parents. Was that kind of similar with you as well?
I would be remiss to say, yeah, absolutely. Before I came out of the womb, I was a doctor, right?
There you go. Yeah.
It's a very cultural stereotype, but that is true. And in fact, yes, there was a huge influence from my parents, but my father actually is a radiologist. So that's actually where the influence came from, not so much, an ethnic background, say, all Indian people are doctors, but I grew up in a household that put education first, and a lot of the things you hear about sort of first generation immigrant families. Mm-hmm. But my father was a radiologist, and I had a keen interest in technology. I had computers from very early on, was coding, ran bulletin boards, and a lot of investment and a lot of interest in computer tech. And so when I started looking at career paths, initially it was going to be computer science, but as I kind of saw more what my father did, I could see an intersection of medicine where have that ability to help people and what goes on with being a doctor at the intersection of technology, which was perfect for what I wanted to do.
Right, which is, you've got this really special intersection of technical background, and now you've got this business savviness. With COVID, obviously, being still an ongoing pandemic, literally keeping us up at night, your professional colleagues, like literally being up at night, worrying and caring about patients. Has there been a shift as far as prioritizing what kind of startup to invest on? Has your appetite kind of changed with the recent pandemic or ongoing pandemic?
It's interesting. When the pandemic first hit, we thought there was going to be huge changes in the way investment dollars flow. And if you talk to startups, I think they will tell you that there is, but there's been an evolution. And I think for us, I think there's been sort of three phases. The first phase was just panic, and everyone sort of shut off all their dollars and said, we don't know what's going to happen.
True.
Phase two, there was and I would say this is around sort of April, May timeframe, people sort of started saying, oh, there's opportunities here. And I think the opportunity segregated into three clear kind of constituents. One was there was a definite predatory kind of investor out there who said, this is an opportunity. There was a set of investors who said, you know what, we're just going to turn it off for now and wait till everything passes, and then we'll figure it out. And then there was a third of the set that said, here's an opportunity. And I think we fell into the latter category, where we had made investments in healthcare, especially in healthcare IT, remote care delivery, a few things where COVID actually jump-started and accelerated a lot of the technologies that we were investing in that the core thesis of how we invest was just accelerated with COVID, of the way where we think healthcare and some of the other industries as well that we invest in went. So we actually survived through this sort of the pandemic up to this point with helping our companies accelerate their time frame. And for the most part, we've seen that.
Yeah, so you mentioned virtual care. I saw that you're managing your portfolio with Carbon Health. Did that portfolio, was that venture in place pre-pandemic or while the pandemic was going on?
Yeah, Carbon was as an investment we made in 2016 with a follow-on recently. So they've been around for quite some time, but they strongly support the thesis that we believe in at Builders, which is that the locus of care is shifting from tertiary care institutions like hospitals to the home, to the patient. With the advent of IoT and remote sensoring and telemedicine, telehealth, and the ability to deliver care closer to the patient themselves, there's no need to go into the ER if you have a cold. You can get treated in your home. You can get treated in urgent care or your primary care physician's office. So Carbon is centered to our thesis, and COVID only accelerated what they were doing as people were, somewhat stuck in their homes but still needed care. They have a telemedicine platform. They have a remote delivery platform, and they were the first in California to really take COVID by the horns and set up a whole bunch of clinics, mobile clinics, to service the California population, and that worked really well.
Yeah, I would imagine that investment, I mean, valuation wise, I mean, that would have probably jumped up quite significantly, like you said, because of, the pandemic just accelerated that. So I guess that's one of those kind of jackpot investments where, environment just accelerated the value of the company. Would you consider it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they had a set of sort of core platform ideas that they were working on deploying. All COVID did was allow them to deploy some of those things, accelerate the timeline to show that those things work well, and
Mhm.
then continue deploying those. So they're in the process of deploying mobile clinics in multiple states now. That was a paper idea pre-COVID, and now it's been accelerated to say, okay, this actually worked. Let's go.
Mhm.
And they're putting clinics on the ground in multiple states right now.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about Builders VC. Like, what kind of appetite does the company have as far as the companies you invest on? Give us a little background there.
Yeah, sure. So we're a Series A venture, Silicon Valley venture firm. We back entrepreneurs who are fixing sort of big, underinvested, antiquated industries. And we focus on industry hubs. And I would say 2/3 of our investments are outside of Silicon Valley. But we provide a unique mission critical assistance to these companies through some of the core vertical SaaS expertise we have. And so if you look at what antiquated industries can be revolutionized by technology, the four sort of big things that we focus on are medical or healthcare, industrial, real estate and construction, and agriculture. And so you can see like, agriculture is a good example. There's IT spend as a percent of revenue in agriculture is 0.3%.
Wow.
And in healthcare, it's 3.2%. I mean, these are not big numbers. And you look at dairy farmers, cattle farmers, they're still using paper and Excel to monitor their livestock. So there's a big opportunity to deploy IT into these verticals and have core expertise across those. And these markets are sort of underinvested by VCs. Only 5% of VC investments are going into these sort of trillion-dollar industries. So that's where we try to focus. I work specifically on the healthcare practice and the healthcare investments as well as real estate. I have some interest in real estate and have done several investments in that space. So that's where the core of my time goes.
I see. Perfect. So say, for example, there are startup companies, because I think you mentioned that you do the Series A, so basically seed funding. What are maybe like top five kind of like qualities of a company you look for where you feel like, okay, this is a slam dunk investment? Is there a specific kind of like principles that you go around evaluating opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. And just one clarification: as a Series A firm, our core investment is not seed
Okay.
or super seed. It's one level after a company has raised seed
Sure.
funding and has validated product. So we're sort of investing in the $3 to $10 million range after a company has some growth from their initial seed. And we can talk a little bit about, for your listeners, just where I see how to raise money if you're starting a company after the discussion. But, each venture capitalist, I think, looks for different things, whether it's relationship, whether it's core expertise, whether it's future vision. For me personally, the three things that I'm interested in are number one is always the entrepreneur. After doing this for long enough, I mean, you can get a feel for entrepreneurs who, you meet some people who are operational CEOs. You just say, this person's going to kill it. There's no way that this person is not this company. It may not be this company, it may be the next company, but this individual has that hustle, that drive, that fire inside them to succeed at this type of thing. So that's definitely number one. And then number two is understanding product market fit. I can tell you in healthcare, I see a lot of ideas where there's an intersection of healthcare and tech. But in healthcare, the other dirty little secret that people often don't realize is that reimbursement, or how do you get paid for this, is something that you have to be really careful about. In the consumer market, you make a phone. If the phone is better than the phone before, people will buy it. in healthcare, it's not so simple. There's payer mechanisms, there's already antiquated structures of reimbursement that, you can have the best idea in the world, but if you can't get a CPT code to fund that, it's just not going to go anywhere. So core sort of product idea is something that's very important to me. And then third is just familiarity and core expertise. I like to stay in my lane in terms of investing and understanding the things that, I have partners who are much smarter than I am for an agriculture investment or an industrial investment. I learn a lot from them and I see what they're doing and I pick up tips on how they interact with entrepreneurs and how they pick companies. But understanding core expertise is also something that's very important to me. We're not generalists in our firm. We have, vertical, deep bench of knowledge in what we're investing in.
Awesome. And Amit, thanks for clarifying the seed investment versus the Series A. Now, for us, like I watch a lot of Shark Tank.
Yeah.
I love that show. There were certain episodes I saw where, man, the investor and the entrepreneur was just fighting, almost a personality clash, but they still end up kind of doing the deal, at least, what's shown in TV. How critical is the chemistry? I know you mentioned about, the grit of the entrepreneur, but as far as personality, is that really important in deciding whether, this investment could work? How critical is the chemistry between the investor and the entrepreneur?
Yeah, for us, the chemistry is critical. And it's a little different than Shark Tank, right? Shark Tank are typically sub $100,000 checks as a seed round where the venture capital, the shark in the Shark Tank has 60, 70, 80, 100 investments at 25, 50K. And, if one goes bad, they just write it off and off they go. As a fund, we're different. We're writing bigger checks. We're very involved in the companies we work with. We're using our networks to promote what they're doing. So we don't want to enter a relationship with an entrepreneur where we foresee that there's going to be an issue. And so we do a significant amount of due diligence and reference checks on entrepreneurs to make sure that, do they fit the culture of our firm? Do they fit the culture of are we going to be, whoever the lead partner is, are we going to be able to work with them closely? It's something that's much more important. I think at the Shark Tank level, at the seed level, it's a little different. Angel investors may or may not be involved. A lot of angel investors use a terminology that I call spray and pray, where they make a lot of little investments in a lot of companies without that much interaction, just because the economics around angel investing is a little different in that you're investing in an idea and an entrepreneur without any traction, revenue, product, so it may or may not work, and so you have to make a lot of investments in order to have that one or two hit.
That's right.
Our methodology is a little different.
Yeah, sure. So how do you find these opportunities? Do you actually find them? Do you seek for these opportunities, or is it usually the other way around, where companies actually go to you and seek for your evaluation? How do you usually find opportunities?
LinkedIn. No, I'm just kidding.
There you go.
This is it's interesting that the network you create generates these leads and these companies, and so we have companies that come wanting to work with us specifically. They've had a friend, a mentor, another colleague who either received an investment from one of our funds or worked with one of us. The best sort of leads that we like are obviously warm leads from a trusted family member in the network, whether it's a CEO of a company we have, whether it's another investor. But honestly, I think in 2020, times have changed from venture capital 10 years ago, where the only way you could get into a venture capitalist was if you had a personal relationship or knew someone who could make an introduction. I think now, or at least for me, we flattened that introduction technology. That you can reach out to me on LinkedIn and send a deck, and we'll look at it. No promise that will invest in your company, but we will look. And technology again has allowed us to increase our bandwidth to assess a lot more technology now. And we can look at something very quickly and know whether there's fit into our fund very quickly and say yes, no. No, a lot of the times it's a no, but no knock on the entrepreneur. It just doesn't fit what we're doing. So, for example, we don't do fintech generally as a category. So a fintech investment, we can say very quickly, that's not something we invest in. But here's 3 other funds you may want to look at. And we have partners who we send deals to all the time, who vice versa send us deals, and we look at them.
I see. Okay. So I would imagine there are more rejects you do than obviously, and I don't mean that reject to be condescending, but there are probably more evaluations you look into where it's just not fit or it's not something you want to invest on versus opportunities that you would want to invest on. What are the typical kind of reasons when you reject or you say this is just aside from that being not the right fit, but are there like typical common red flags that you see that startup companies should be avoiding when they pitch?
Yeah, I mean, I think it splits into, this is kind of interesting, is when we look at deals and sometimes, how did you decide so quickly you couldn't do it? I mean, sometimes it's very easy. So it's about a third. And a third of them is it's a bad fit. The entrepreneur is a bad fit. The idea is a bad fit. The actual technology is not something that is core thesis for us. So those ones are, they just don't fit with what we do. Another third is usually comes in that the entrepreneur or the group sort of underestimates or has misinterpreted sort of where they are in their cycle of development. So they may be doing a $10 million raise, but they have no revenue. And, we would go back to them and say, you probably need to do a smaller raise, figure out product market fit, get to revenue positive or at least some revenue. You can't be in a state where you're developing a product for an MVP and try to do a $10 million raise. And some can. I mean, if you're, whatever, if you're the founder of Uber and this is your second company, you can get money. No, everyone will give you money. There's no problem. But for the most part, most investments, folks are trying to raise maybe above their weight class. There should be either a seed or a super seed, and they think they're doing an A, or they're an A and they're doing a B, etc. So that would be the second set. And then the third set is just there's something about the deal that we just can't touch it. Whether we have strict limitations in our LP agreements. For example, we don't invest in cannabis. So it'll just be some business that we have strict limitations on that we can't invest in. We have some of our LPs are from Canada, so we have some Canadian requirements. So just things that are around more structural issues rather than whether the entrepreneur is good, bad, or not, whether or not the appropriate phase of funding. It's just there's some contractual restrictions that we have as a fund.
Perfect. So, Amit, I want to be respectful of your time. We're kind of coming into the end of the show here. I guess for those who are going for a Series A funding, what advice would you give them just to make sure they increase their chances of actually getting the fund they're looking for?
Yeah, I think the most important thing was make sure you're at the level for a Series A check. That you've done some research and understand, where are you in the cycle of development? I mean, if you have an idea on a napkin, you're not a Series A company. You're trying to raise money to finish your coding for your MVP, you're not a Series A company. So number one would be understand where you are. And then number two is just, use your network to ensure that you're doing everything you can to demonstrate that if you have a product, that the product is selling, all the pieces that go into being a successful operation, that you're highlighting those things and understanding where you fit in that market properly. That's something that I think we see all the time. We say, have you thought about this sort of opportunity? And they're like, oh, no, that's a good idea. I mean, be comprehensive in your understanding of your own business and where you fit in the industry and what your potential options are.
Well, these are very, very critical tips, advice, and obviously real life advice. It's not Shark Tank, but it's definitely critical advice, I think, for our audience here. So again, Amit, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for spending time with us today. Should there be a company who want to reach out to you, what's the best way? How can they connect with you? LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn, I guess, would be actually, yeah. I mean, that's the most available. So we can include the LinkedIn address. It's actually fairly straightforward. It's LinkedIn, and then the handle is Dr. A Mehta, Mehta. Yeah, just reach out on there. You can send a deck through there. Often we'll have someone look at it very quickly and get back to you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Amit. So guys, this concludes our show for today. Again, this show was brought to you by Gaptic Global, your one-stop shop outsourcing company. for customer service and various back office services. You can learn more about their services at www.gaptechglobal.com. This has been your host, Chris Yap, of the podcast show From Zero to Revenue. As Stephen Covey said, all things are created twice, first in the mind, then in reality.